Hi, fourth graders. So we are going to keep reading The I Survived the Attacks of September 11th. Again, just as a reminder to find that book, it is under the week of September 13th through 17th. It says online book. When you click on it, there's a PDF of the book. When you click on that, it opens like this. You can click to open with Cami, and when you open with Cami, it's going to look like this, and you can zoom in and read as much or as far as you want. We are going to be reading chapter 3, so I'm going to scroll down to chapter 3. So the first couple of chapters were introduced to a little boy named Lucas who lives in New York, and he happened to be in New York City on September 11th, 2001, which is the day that the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, were attacked by a terrorist group, which we've been talking a little bit about. Today we're going to be reading chapters 3 and 4, talking about Lucas's, experience with this event. So chapter 1 told us he was in New York. Chapter 2 backed us up in time to about 2.5 or so weeks before the actual attack. So we're in August, the end of August. And Lucas was at football practice, and something happened at football practice. What happened? Yeah, he fell. His ankle wobbled, he tripped, he fell, and it says everything went black. He blacked out. So chapter 3. The next few hours were a blur. The guys swarming all around him, Coach B helping him off the field, the long wait at the emergency room, Mom and Dad's worried faces. But in the end, Lucas was fine. He just had a concussion, which is one of our vocabulary words. And if you click on this, it will take you to the word, to the definition. But we'll be defining them in class as well. Sure, it was worse than the concussion he had got during playoffs last season, and the one before that during the summer after fourth grade. But he knew he would get better if he just took it easy, just like the other times. That night, Dad came into Lucas's room to check on him. Feeling okay? He asked. I'm good, Dad, Lucas said. He really was feeling much better. What killed him was knowing he'd be off the field for 12 days. He already missed the guys. Looking up at Dad, Lucas saw a face almost exactly like his own. They even had the same specks of green in their brown eyes. So those are some sensory words. I know what his eyes look like. I know the color. You need anything? Dad asked. I'm good, Lucas said again. Lucas stayed very still, hoping Dad would stick around and talk. But Dad stood up. He leaned over and kissed Lucas on the forehead, and he was gone. Lucas's heart sank a little. There had been a time when Dad would have plopped himself down on Lucas's bed and announced his plan for their next adventure. Some nights back then, they'd wait for Mom to fall asleep so they could sneak down to the basement to work on the Seagrave. Dad and Lucas had been a team of two. But then came the warehouse fire. 2 years had passed since it happened, but the memories were still sharp. The doorbell ringing in the middle of the night, the Chief and Uncle Benny standing in the doorway, still stinking of smoke, Mom's tears, and later, the sight of Dad wrapped in bandages, his face white with pain. Lucas had always known that his dad's job was dangerous. Sometimes Dad would bring Lucas to the firehouse on his days off. Lucas would help with the chores, washing the truck, cooking lunch, checking the hoses. But what he loved most was sitting around the big round kitchen table, listening to the guys talk about the fires they had fought. To Lucas, they were superheroes. They ran into buildings filled with blazing orange flames and choking black smoke. They used metal spears to smash windows, rip out walls, and bash through doors. They carried people down oven hot stairwells and dangled from ropes hundreds of feet in the air. The fires they tamed were more evil and ferocious than any video game villain or movie monster. But it wasn't until the warehouse fire that Lucas understood what a fire could do to a real man, a man like his dad. Dad never talked about what happened to him. inside that warehouse. All Lucas knew was that 4 firemen died, and Dad was badly burned in the explosion. Even after all this time, the scars on Dad's arms were bright red and lumpy, like raw hamburger. So it does a really good job of describing the scars that Lucas's dad has. Tells me what they look like, and it compares them to raw hamburger. If you've ever helped mom or dad in the kitchen, and that raw hamburger kind of looks bumpy and it's bright red. But the burns weren't the worst of what the fire did to Dad. It took away his easy smile and booming laugh. There's a vocabulary word. Booming or boomed. It turned him quiet. So there we see opposites. The opposite of booming would be very quiet. Some days Dad barely talked at all. He'd get this look in his eyes, like his mind was somewhere else, probably sifting through the ashes in the warehouse. Lucas stopped asking when they'd get back to that model of the Seagrave, which was half finished and covered with dust in the basement. And when the memories of that came back, or he started worrying that Dad would never be himself again, he closed his eyes and imagined himself on the football field, surrounded by the guys, their voices calling his name as he made one of his famous catches. So we find out a little bit about Dad in this chapter. We find out Dad has been badly injured, and it's kind of affected his personality. Before the personality, he was real talkative and energetic, wanted to work with Lucas. His laugh was booming. But after the fire, Lucas says he changed. He's not as energetic. He's not as talkative. And instead of a booming laugh, he's very quiet. So events can do that to people. Things that you experience in your life can definitely change how you act or how you feel. And that we see that with his dad. All right. Chapter 4 brings us to Monday, September 10th. So now we're a day before the attack. So we've jumped forward a little bit more in time. Monday, September 10th, 2001. Monday came, the last day before Lucas would be allowed back on the field. He had been crossing out the days on his calendar, counting down. Mom picked him up early from school for a doctor's appointment. She wanted him checked out before he was cleared to play. "I'm fine," Lucas said. "Can't you tell?" Lucas lifted his arm and flexed his bicep. Mom laughed. "You look incredible." Mom had decided to take him to a new doctor. "I hear he's the best," she said. "We were lucky he could fit you in." His name was Dr. Barrett. All right, so here we have a new character. With his blonde crew cut and huge shoulders, he looked more like a linebacker than a doctor. Dr. Barrett brought Lucas into an exam room and checked him over, looking in his eyes, listening to his heart and lungs. He asked him to walk across the room with one foot in front of the other. Lucas was sure he passed all the tests. After the exam, Dr. Barrett waved Mom and Lucas back into his office. The wall was covered with framed diplomas. Those are the certificates that you get from your college when you graduate, and pictures of football players. Lucas looked at a photo of a rough-looking man in a Denver Broncos uniform. "That's Dan Brock," Dr. Barrett said. "Have you heard of him?" The name was familiar, but Lucas didn't know why. He was an All-American at the University of Wisconsin, then a third-round pick for the NFL. Dr. Barrett pointed to the next photo in a row, a big smiling man with a busted-up nose and chubby baby cheeks. "That's Tyrus Vallone. He was a star tackle at Florida State, and then he played for 10 years for Green Bay, the Packers." There were 3 other pictures on the wall. It was only the last one that Lucas recognized. "Is that Stan Walsh? Didn't he? Isn't he?" He was dead. He had died just a few months ago. Uncle Benny had been upset about it. He had played against Stan Walsh when he was a college player. Dr. Barrett nodded, seeing that Lucas knew about Stan Walsh. He had just turned 40, the doctor said. He had the same kind of brain disease you see in men in their 80s. Dr. Barrett pointed up at the wall at all of the players. "All of those men are dead," he said. They donated, they gave their brains to our lab so we can study them. They all died because of concussions," which is what Lucas has, right? A chill ran up and down Lucas's spine. He looked at Mom. Her eyes were wide with shock. We used to think that concussions were like sprained ankles, Dr. Barrett said. You get dinged, you let it heal, and you're good to go. But now we know that too many concussions can actually change the brain. How many concussions is too many? Mom asked. Lucas held his breath. I would say that in an 11-year-old boy, 3 concussions in 2 years is too many. The room was suddenly quiet. Lucas could feel the eyes of those football players looking down on him. I can stay out another week, Lucas said. It would be torture, but he'd be back in time for the first game. I'm sorry, Lucas, Dr. Barrett said, but what I'm suggesting is that you never play football again. Can you believe it? Football was the one thing that Lucas really said he was enjoying. All night, Lucas argued and begged. He had a million reasons why the doctor was wrong, and he told Mom and Dad practically every single one. When that didn't work, he offered to sit out for 2 more weeks. Then 3. Just please don't make me quit. Finally, Dad put his hands on Lucas's shoulder. Lucas, Dad said in a soft voice, football is a game. I know you love it, but it is just a game. A game. Of course, Lucas knew that. But the game was the most important thing in his life. What would he do without his team? That night, he lay in bed for hours, thinking. It was past midnight when he realized what he needed to do. He had to see Uncle Benny, before Mom and Dad talked to Coach, before it was too late. Dad left early the next morning. He was teaching a class at The Rock, the firefighter training school, across the bridge from Manhattan, on Randall's Island. Mom dropped Lucas off at the bus stop on her way to work. The minute her car disappeared, Lucas sprinted back home. He grabbed his bike and pedaled as fast as he could to the train station. He caught the 7:17 with 1 minute to spare. Lucas knew how wrong this was. To skip school? To sneak into the city without Mom and Dad knowing? But right then, none of that mattered. He had to see Uncle Benny. Somehow, Uncle Benny would make this better. So now we know why Lucas was in New York when he wasn't supposed to be, and Mom and Dad didn't know. And it all comes back to needing to see Uncle Benny because he wants to keep playing football. When we move on to chapter 5, we're going to find out a little bit more information from Lucas about what happened right before the first tower was attacked. After you've read these first 4 chapters, make sure in the reading classroom that you have answered the questions that are right here, Monday questions, chapters 1 through 4. Make sure you have those answered before you answer the questions. Or make sure you've listened to the videos, before you answer the questions. Those questions are due today. Until I talk to you later, have a good day.